Good afternoon and welcome to this very special edition of the 21 News Podcast. I'm Managing Editor Justin Mitchell. After more than 4 decades in journalism covering the Mahoning and Shenango Valleys, including 26 years leading the charge as news director at WFMJ, Mona Marie Alexander is retiring. She's led a career that has included everything from public corruption cases and investigations to solutions-based journalism and a sense of duty to the community, spearheading the Feed Our Valley campaign that saved countless families from going hungry. So for this podcast, we're doing something a little different. With me today is our Assistant News Director, Sheila Miller, and it is our great honor to be here today with the one who's guided us through so much for so many years, Mona Marie Alexander. Mona, thank you for sitting down with us today.
Thank you.
So, you know, this is loose. This is free form. We just wanted to start kind of at the beginning. What originally drew you to journalism?
You know, I was born and raised in Chicago, and I've actually lived here far longer than I lived in Chicago. I've lived here 44 years. I lived there maybe 20. Through college, but I grew up in a real newsy family. My parents were both huge news consumers. Television news was not anywhere near in its infancy. I mean, it had been grinding along. Chet Huntley and David Brinkley and Walter Cronkite and, you know, all those guys that, you know, you now study about in journalism school. They were on the air then, but there were also newspapers. And my dad would go out. We would get the Monday through Friday paper delivered. Saturday they didn't care about. Sunday you would go out and buy the paper. And my dad would always say, come on Lefty, we're gonna go get the 10 pounds of paper. Called me Lefty because I'm left-handed. And we would go and get literally this much newspapers, the Chicago Sun-Times and the Chicago Trib. And we read it. And I read it and I kept up with current events and we would discuss it at the dinner table. And so I think that was, you know, just a natural part of growing up. And then I do remember specifically in a sophomore in high school, I took a journalism class almost as an elective. And that's when I realized that people actually got paid to do this. You know, I'm like, you know, you consume it, but you don't know that there's people back there doing what we do. And I thought, oh, Christ, this is it. And 2 years later, I was in journalism school, and you know, then I graduated, and this was the first place I came.
Why here? How did it get you here? Do you remember?
You know, I actually had an offer in Zanesville, and I think I accepted it. I remember going there, and I said, well, can I see the photography department? You know, they didn't call it the videographer department back then. And they said, sure, and they took me over to a filing cabinet, opened it, and pulled out one film camera. And I thought, okay, all right, I suspected a little bit more. And then the news director at WKBN called. And so even though I had already accepted this position, I thought, well, let me take a look at this, okay? And so Youngstown not that far from Zanesville, I came here and interviewed. And they made me an offer on the spot. I said yes. I drove back to Zanesville and at least told them in person that I was taking the job in Youngstown. And the guy said, you know, I got to respect you for coming back here and doing that. And that's it. That's
so tell the audience, put that in perspective, for you to get a position in the Youngstown market straight out of college, that's unheard of.
Yeah, the perspective is that you can do that now, but you could not do that back in 1979.
Couple years experience.
Right, yeah, and it was a bigger market then. Our market was bigger. Our market's real dynamic now, but it was bigger. Everybody knows that because it was bigger before all the steel mills closed. And I arrived here as that was ending. The big announcements of sheet and tube and U.S. Steel, that had been made, and I started covering the aftermath of that, which was very sad. You know, I mean, I remember when downtown was boarded up and you know, the sheet metal was down in front of the storefront and it never went up, and those were bleak times. for the entire region, much less the downtown area.
And your beat was Youngstown, wasn't it?
Absolutely, my beat was always Youngstown. I was when I was working for the other station, I was downtown. I was always a downtown Youngstown journalist. Yeah.
So what took you from the streets to the desk?
I think Joe and I, my husband Joe, that we decided to make our home here. I think that was it. And we could have moved 2 careers and had that transition. And once I decided it wasn't important for me to go back to Chicago, because Youngstown at the time, and still is, very much like Chicago, it's a microcosm of that city. It's got a lot of the same problems. And even the history of organized crime in Chicago and the Valley and all of that, it was so similar that I kind of fell in love with this area, fell in love with the people here who will give you the shirt off their back, and the way of life here and everything that goes with being from the Valley, that we just decided, no, we're going to stay here.
So, I mean, that was a little bit of a leap ahead with from the streets to the desk, and I know just to the average person when we say the desk. I mean, let's talk about the roles that you've played in journalism, because obviously this is starting as a reporter.
Right.
And so let's start there. As a reporter, you mentioned the steel mills closing. What were some of the big ones you've covered as a reporter first, and then we'll get into...
Okay. As a reporter, I mean, probably the organized crime beat. That was a big one. Joey Naples, who was a longtime Mahoning Valley mobster, was murdered, and that was a huge deal. A lot of people knew Joey. A lot of people followed that. So I covered that. And of course, Jim Trafficant's 1980 campaign for sheriff, I covered that, got to know him very well, and subsequently covered his racketeering trial in '83. That was the one where he fired his attorney, defended himself, and got acquitted. That was crazy. I mean, that was just, that was wild. And for a young reporter, trying to figure out what an affidavit is and what a pro se defendant is, and all of those things that you are now teaching our young reporters, I had to figure out for myself, only because I was up in Cleveland. I was living up there, essentially. And, it just, it was an incredible experience and a lot to learn. And then there was the '85 tornado as a reporter. That was not really going home except to, change clothes, grab a shower, a little bit of sleep, and head back up to Niles, or I think it was Wheatland, which was the Pennsylvania community. So those were, big stories that I was involved in as a reporter.
And that's how many years as a reporter? About?
I think it was 10.
Really?
I think it was 10 as a reporter and 8 as a news manager.
Over at the competition.
Yeah.
And did Jimbo have any names for you? Do you remember? He has names for everybody.
Are they repeatable?
Yeah. Are they?
No, I don't think he did, Sheila.
I was just curious.
He did. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm trying to think, did he? No. No. I mean, I was his, I knew I was his favorite reporter. He didn't like Bertram, he just didn't like Bertram. And, we would cover him at these big events, and I would walk in with my videographer, and he would say, "Oh, I have to stop because my favorite reporter is here." And I'm like, "Oh my God, you talk about embarrassing."
Right,
I remember it, 40 years later, I'm like, "Oh my Lord." But yeah, he was great to cover, and you guys covered him too. I mean, when he got to Congress, the Beam Me Up, Scotty. I mean, I do remember standing with a group of journalists once, and they came here to cover him. For what reason, I don't know. There were so many reasons. And I'm standing next to this reporter, and he goes, "Is this guy your congressman?" I go, "Yeah, great." He's like, "Yeah, this is great." Because for a reporter used to covering the elected officials who say the same thing over and over, the canned sound bites, the stump speeches that you get used to covering, to have somebody like him just shoot from the hip for a reporter was just gravy. It was just great.
So then you went to management at the competition.
Yeah, I
for
did.
a few years.
I did, and that's because Joe and I made the decision to stay here, and I needed to grow. And so, I went from managing myself on my beat every day to managing a small group of reporters, and I liked it. I liked news management. I wasn't sure I was going to, and what would come next after that. But as you all know, I mean, it is really fun being behind the scenes. and seeing the big picture, like how all of the East Palestine coverage comes together. I mean, that's gratifying for us when we sit in our, little area and we say, okay, how are we going to utilize our resources to tell the best possible story for the people who really want this information. And so I was able to do that and did that for, I think, 8 years.
Right. Okay. And then you're approached, or did you see the ad? How did the big F get you?
John Gerda called me. Yeah, John Gerda called. And I did not know that there was an opening. For the news director's job, I did not know. And I don't know, did I meet him?
No, I'm sure you did.
I'm sure I did. I'm trying to remember the dynamics of it.
Okay.
But yeah, no, I met with John and really want you to come here, really want you to come here. And it just, I liked him, to be honest with you. I liked him and had a lot of respect for Mark Brown, who is our owner, and what he was doing with the Vindicator and just who he was in the community, because you guys know him, but a lot of people don't, and because he's private, and they just don't know what an impact he's really had on this area. So I knew Mark I had interviewed him actually as a reporter, and I knew him, and I was really comfortable with his leadership. And it's hard, as you well know, Sheila, it's hard not to love John Gerda, because John Gerda loved you and me, and we worked with him for a long time. And so so that was that. That was actually fairly, I had to go back and forth, with my husband. You want to do this, it's a lot of responsibility, and you just don't think too much. You just go.
Right.
You know what I mean? If you think too much, you're going to talk yourself out of it.
Okay, so then that was 1997, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and that would be the period that I always fondly sort of think of as really the beginning of the legend of Mona Alexander, right? Because, I mean, let's talk about what the landscape was at the time. WFMJ was a third place station at that point in time, right? You're coming from a station that had a long history, and the work was cut out for you, and you took this no holds barred, no prisoners approach to really kind of seizing the reins, and nobody was going to tell you that. Nobody was going to tell you no for anything.
Right.
So let's talk about that. Tell me about those days.
Well, I think it really, again, it starts with Mark Brown and John Gerda, because they really wanted to be number one. And when you have somebody pushing you who says, we want to be number one, John was the worst. Want to be number one. She's going to make me number one. We're going to be number one. It's just like a constant drill. Well, it's kind of like, shh, let me do my thing. But the reality was, I knew that he had my back. And so, when you know that, that's real important. Then what you do is you start going around and you start looking at what your strengths and weaknesses are, what your assets are, what your liabilities are, and stuff like that. And that's when I found her. Okay? Because Sheila was she was making a huge contribution and doing a great job. It's sort of, I think, languishing a little bit there, because she wasn't, like, all of her talents were not being developed. And so she and I just forged this relationship, which I don't want to talk too much about, or we're both going to start crying. But we forged this relationship that we've had for 26 years, where we were able to get that done. And yeah, I mean, can you say ballsy?
You can say ballsy.
Person. and so yeah, I mean, I tried new things. I threw stuff at the wall. Some of it stuck, some of it didn't. When you're the third person to come in with a morning show, you want to do something different. So, I hired Mike Gauntner, who is a news god in this town. And, he did a survey of everybody all over the station. What do you want to see? What do you want to see? And that turned into WFMJ Today. And then we hired people who were largely personality based, Frank Marzullo, Scott Schneider, Nicole Perry, and great personalities, and it took off. And then you carry that through. You carry that sort of, torpedoes be damned sort of approach to, creating content, and it brings us all the way up to the 5 o'clock newscast. The competition has had their show on the air for 30 some years, And we come out, and within a year, we're #1 because we put a lot. Did we not put a lot of effort into it?
Put a lot of effort
into it.
We planned a
Yeah.
phantom 5 o'clock news for
Right.
a solid year before
That's
it
exactly
launched,
right.
so that we had muscle memory out of the gate.
That's right. And what happens with that is you put a show on the air, and it's something like, and this is not a bad analogy, it's kind of like Seinfeld. Seinfeld, those characters were fully formed. They were fully developed when that show went on the air. George didn't change from this to this. He was the same. And that's because they knew what they wanted to create, and the audience immediately reacted to it and stayed loyal to it. So I think that's what we see. I hate comparing one of our newscasts to a comedy, but but it's the thought that goes into it, and then creating a show and knowing that when you have an anchor like Lindsay McCoy, she's going to pull that off, and she did, she does, she continues to.
And that amongst all of your strengths, that's one of your strengths, is identifying talent and what they can and can't do.
I have no idea where that comes from.
Yeah, right.
No secrets. I don't know. I can't say it.
Well, but it's also, but another one of your strengths also is just that, lots of people, I think, see things and they see the reasons why you can't do something, and that's just simply
Right.
not how you're wired. I mean, one of my favorite Mona Alexander stories is the live truck breaks down on election night. And what happens, Mona?
That was crazy. So we were at somebody's campaign, and the idea was to move around to various different locations. But the truck breaks down, and so, oh shit, I don't know if it was you who said something to me, but somebody told me, oh, our live truck's dead, da-da-da-da-da. And so I hired a tow truck for that entire evening to bring it around to the various
I don't even
locations.
remember that.
Yes, that is a true story.
Yeah.
It was the same year that I locked myself out of my office and had to bring a locksmith in to bust it open. And you were up in the control
That's what I was
room.
going to say. You guys probably didn't tell me. I'm up in the control room waiting for the live truck to go up, and it goes up. I don't know how it's going up. So
That could be it.
never heard of that
Yes,
one. Don't
I
remember
thought I
that
was
one.
going to hear it from John Gurdick about the tow truck bill. What the hell are you doing? Hiring a tow truck, because what is that? $100 bucks a pop,
And-
$200 bucks?
Yeah, and how many hours you
Oh
did?
yeah, all night. Yeah, never heard a word. Never heard a word. But yeah, no, that is an absolute true story. And locking myself out of my office, I'm like, damn, So yeah, I mean, you just think, think out of the box, and not be afraid to make mistakes. And and I made mistakes. You guys know some of my colossal mistakes, but you just pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and go.
Yeah.
Well, we realized you were human at that point then.
Well, I'm still not sure, but she might do it on purpose occasionally just to throw us off, right?
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was going to just ask the moment when she knew that, she's ready to retire.
I think it was last summer. You know me, I like to, research and plan. I don't do, a lot of stuff, something important like this without doing it. You slow down. There's a physical component to it. And people tell you, you'll know, and that's part of it. Part of it is you'll know it's time to retire, when you just start kind of watching people around you and this massive amount of energy that especially people like you have, Justin. Sheila too, she's a ball of energy. And you're like, oh my God, I can't wait for the week to end. That starts catching up with you after a while. So there's a little bit of that. I mean, I'm healthy and able to travel and all that, but that was a part of it. And I think if I'm being real honest, I think from September of 22 to September of 23 was a pretty momentous year for us. We launched the 5. We went right into that U.S. Senate debate with J.D. Vance and Tim Ryan. One of only 2 Ohio stations, right?
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Yes,
To get
there were
that
2 debates in that race.
Huge debate. Then we went to the election. Then we went to the Jennings investigation, I think was probably next.
Well, East Palestine
East Palestine.
happened while we were working on the Jennings investigation.
Huge story. Then the Jennings investigation, and then we did 101 West. And that was a big year, from September of 22 to really December of where we're at now, 23. And I thought, I'm probably not going to have another year like that. for the amount of time I'm going to stay here. Certainly you guys will, but I'm probably not. And then I started thinking, do I really want another year like this? You know, because it was a lot of energy to expend, but it was a great year. I mean, everything that we did was amazing. So I think all that, and then my mom's death. You guys have been great with me on supporting me in that. You know, you start to just kind of put all those things together. And then, you know, my husband was like, you know, you really ought to retire. You really ought to retire. He's not going to push it.
Right.
But, you know, he wanted me at home, and he knew that I was, you know, getting closer to that. And I want to spend time with him, you know. So it was really all, those are real personal reasons, but it all just kind of coalesced around September.
Right. And it really did trigger when you got those ratings for the 5, and we were.
It really did trigger.
Number one.
Yeah, it really did, because I read you guys the text that I sent to Joe that, you know, if you want to go out on top, and who doesn't, you know, if we're all being honest, we got those ratings in September, and they were so good. And I thought about everything that we did. That's why I think I said September to September.
Right.
Yeah. And even though October, November, and December here have been great too, but yeah, I think that was it. I think everything just sort of coalesced, and it felt like I was being given this sign from the universe that, you know, go spend time with your husband, travel, do the things you like to do, and job well done.
Right. But I mean, it was quick. Like, for the people listening, I mean, she thought about it for a year, but literally calls us into her office.
Yeah.
And just said, you know, we're number 1. I'm like, oh yeah, ready to say, yeah, okay, now let's go. What are we doing next? And she says, and I'm going to retire. This is it. This is the sign. I'm like, WTF.
I did say, don't cry, Sheila. I gave you that heads up.
It's the one time I didn't listen to you.
And then you both cried, and I sat there kind of like,
You're in shock, probably. I was like,
no, looking for the words. And I mean, you guys know that's not common for me. I don't know what to say, and I was pretty silent in that meeting.
But it really did. Like, it just, like, that quick.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. It took a year, but it was quick.
Right, right.
Isn't that weird?
Yeah, it is. It is.
You know, I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about journalism and the importance of journalism and how it's changed over the course of your career, and where you see it now and where you see it heading and why it's important. So, not that that's not a real heavy way to put it in one question, but.
Well, I mean, I think right now some of our elected officials have a very dangerous relationship with the truth. And that points directly to the importance of the role of journalists as we progress in covering the 2024 campaign and you know, the political climate in general. And that is the biggest change that I see from what I encountered over the years, because politicians have always used the media has always used politicians and sources, and that dynamic relationship has always been in play. But now I see that it is kind of at a dangerous level. By dangerous, I mean dangerous to the survival of the republic. So I think that the role of journalists moving forward is to continue to report the truth, and report it not through any type of bias, any type of prism, anything other than the just plain, just critical truth is the biggest role that we will have to play, or you guys will have to play, and the biggest difference I've seen in my 44 years as a journalist. That's absolutely critical. So the news media needs to be vigilant, truthful, tenacious, do it with zeal, and be fair. But that is the most important role of the media moving forward, I think.
Sheila, you had something fun and much less heavy.
Yeah, well, something
that you wanted to.
Something to end on.
I think I'll take the hard question.
No, this is, you know, rapid fire.
No, not really. What is
it's just like questions. You're just going to answer either yes or no, or answer.
Oh my God.
You
Okay.
know, like,
all right. Yeah,
they
like
do-
on Ellen. Ellen used to
Did she do that?
I think she did.
I
yeah.
used to know, like, sporting, they'll say boxers or briefs, and you say.
Yeah, I
which
shouldn't
one.
say I was in my office watching Ellen, should I?
No. Well, you have to have NBC on, so it's on, all right.
Okay.
All right. So, up early or sleep in?
Up early.
And this is all obviously questions related to your retirement.
Oh, okay.
That's what they are. Sorry, should have said that. Retire or eventually work again? In
work
some
again.
capacity.
Work again.
Okay.
Yeah.
Learn a new hobby or find time for old hobbies you have?
Find time for old hobbies.
Okay. Write a book or read a book?
Right.
Active in social media or dormant?
Dormant.
Okay. First thing you'll buy? Buy, signature, like bigger thing. You would want to buy?
A car.
Okay.
My car's 10 years old.
First place to travel to?
The nearest fine art exhibition, wherever it is.
Wherever it is. First show to binge?
There's this, I don't know the name of it. It's on Netflix, and it's this, I'll just say The Crown. That starts tomorrow. Brandon told me it starts tomorrow.
One thing you will not miss about the job?
The stress.
The stress.
Yeah, the
Okay.
stress.
All
Yeah,
right.
for people who don't know, our jobs are very stressful. They are. And I'm not sure why, because when you live with it every day and it becomes such a part of your, your existence. But that was another thing that made me realize it was time to go, because that becomes harder and harder to take as you get older.
Right.
And so I would say the stress, yeah.
And last question, first person you think you're likely to hear from WFMJ?
I have no idea.
That's
I'm
not
gonna go with Robert.
just wing
I'm gonna
it.
go with Robert. He brought me a bottle of wine today. He's probably gonna call and say, "How'd you like it?" Yeah, I'll go with Robert.
All right, that's my rapid
That
fire.
was good. I like that.
I mean, is there anything else that you would like to add that we didn't touch on that you just want to
Oh
make
my
sure?
God, you guys are great. I want to say thank you to both of you, because I absolutely could not have done this without both of you. And leaving, I have no qualms at all, no concerns, no, oh my God, I think that, you guys are inheriting a really solid news organization and a great television station that really cares about the community. And it's going to be fun and interesting to watch what you guys do.
Well, thanks for the foundation.
You're welcome.
Thank you for everything.
Love you guys.
Love you.
Thank you.
Yeah. I can't even do it. All right.